Lead. What are we to make of these comments by Vladimir Putin? The Russian president said in an interview with the Associated Press and Russian state television that Russia doesn't exclude the option of a United Nations-backed resolution on military strikes on Syria, but the evidence, quote, ought to be convincing. It shouldn't be based on some rumors and information obtained by intelligence agencies through some kind of eavesdropping, some conversations and things like that, unquote. Secretary of State John Kerry proclaimed that this is a good sign.
I would interpret his comments today as hopeful that perhaps at the G20, he and the president will have a good conversation, and there may be a road forward where Russia would consider not blocking action.
Putin also said that he felt sorry that the president canceled their one-on-one meeting. He said, quote, "We work, we argue about some issues, we are human. Sometimes one of us gets vexed." Right, vexed. No big deal. But seriously now, is there any chance we can count on Russia as a partner in any way? Is the country willing to do anything to help the long-suffering Syrian people? Let's bring in former State Department spokesman P.J. Crowley and Julia Ioffe, senior editor of the New Republic. Julia, what do you make of Putin's comments here? Is he extending a hand to President Obama, or is he just being his kind of Cheshire cat self?
I think it's probably the latter. As a good Russian friend of mine once said, you know, Putin doesn't ever exclude anything. But he does tend to kind of surprise us. But I doubt he's going to allow Russia to vote yes for intervention in Syria.
PJ, I want to play something that Secretary of Defense Hagel said today in the hearing that maybe you can give us some clarity on. He was asked about the source of the chemical weapons that Assad allegedly used against his own people.
Where did the chemical weapons come from?
Well, there's no secret that the Assad regime has had chemical weapons, significant stockpiles of chemical weapons.
From a particular country?
Well, the Russians supply them. Others are supplying them with those chemical weapons. They make some themselves.
The Russians supply them. Is that recently? Have the Russians done this recently, or are these old stockpiles from before the ban?
I think they've had them for some time. I would say this is probably not a new development. Russia, like the United States, is eliminating its chemical stocks, but Syria is one of a handful of countries that have not agreed to the Chemical Weapons Convention. They still see them as a deterrent, and obviously, as the Secretary laid out last week, they see them as a tool in this civil war.
Let's look more broadly at something President Obama said earlier today. He talked about how this isn't his red line, it's the world's red line, and it's true that a significant majority of the nations in this world have signed on to the Chemical Weapons Treaty. PJ, where is the rest of the world? We have President Obama, maybe France, maybe Turkey, a couple other Gulf nations quietly saying, go get them. But if this is truly an atrocity that the world has signed on to oppose, how come we're so alone?
I think there is far more support privately than we have seen publicly. But I think it really is about Syria. You look at the contrast between Syria and Libya. There were lots of people in the region that said, okay, let's go after Gaddafi. Gaddafi had no friends. You know, Syria is a very complex country. It's attached to everything in the Middle East. And in many of these countries, they're hedging their bets to see ultimately, will Assad be defeated or will he survive?
The Obama administration clearly, behind closed doors, blames Russia for the fact that this is not even going through the United Nations Security Council right now. And they say it's not a relationship of ideology. It's just that Syria is a client. They buy arms and other things from Russia. Is it that simple? Is that what the problem is?
I don't think it's just that. And you had Secretary Kerry in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday saying that it's not an ideological relationship, but a geopolitical one. And I think that's more accurate. I think Putin especially sees himself, he's a Cold War guy. He has not shed the Cold War mentality. He sees himself as a foil and a counterweight to America in the world. So if America attacks somebody, we have to defend them. If America defends somebody, we have to attack them. And as for the weapons, India buys orders of magnitude more weapons than Syria does. So if Assad goes, they'll find other clients.
And the two of those go together. Through all of the transitions since the end of the Cold War, Russia has lost, states that it supported during the Cold War, particularly in the Middle East. And also, Putin, to some extent, reminds me of Dick Cheney. Cheney, as White House Chief of Staff, saw what he thought was the diminution of executive power, and that animated him. Likewise, Putin, as a product of the Cold War, has seen Russian influence, decrease significantly. And he's trying to use various levers geopolitics where he can, energy where he can, to try to elevate Russian influence.
We only have about a minute left. Secretary Kerry today said that there basically had been offers from these anonymous countries that are rooting on the United States that they would pay for the entire thing if we toppled Bashar al-Assad, if we had done complete regime change. Who are these, big money rollers that we're talking about whose names shall not be mentioned? Is Saudi Arabia? Is it the Gulf states?
Yeah. Well, I think, and you've got a situation where I think that they're conscious of the fact that the United States is going to do something meaningful, but not something decisive. And these are guys who either see these things, not in shades of gray. They see these things as, if you're going to knock them off, knock them off. We'll pick up the pieces, but if you're not going to knock them off, then we're going to hedge.
And just in 30 seconds left, what is Saudi Arabia's interest in having Bashar al-Assad out of power, other than him being not such a great guy?
Well, then they get to get at Iran, right? And it's part of the larger sectarian tensions in the region.
Just Sunni versus Shia.
I think, and also against Saudi Arabia versus Iran, playing for influence
Supremacy
in the region.
Yeah. Great, Julia Ioffe, PJ Crowley, thank you.